light, walking your fellows and others in tongues, walking your fellows and others in tongues.
Welcome. Welcome to you today, right now. If you feel weary, rest your feet and put down your cares, if only for an hour. If you feel joyful, let your soul dance and be infectious in the best kind of way. But however you feel, wherever you are on life's journey, whatever you want to become in this oh so wondrous and struggling world, welcome to you, today, right now. I invite you to rise if you like, in body or spirit, to join our voices in our opening hymn, number 347 from the Great Hymnal, Gather the Spirit. There is just one verse, so it's gonna go quick.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
We'll be lighting our chalice this morning. And these chalice lighting words come from Eric Williams. We all emerge from, dwell within, are transformed by, and called back to love. May your mind be humbled before this mystery. May your heart grow hopeful by it. May you be sustained by this love always. It is now time for our story for all ages. This morning, I will share a koan, a short story or dialogue used to teach students of Zen Buddhism. The Zen master Ikkyu had always been very clever. One day, as a young monk, he got himself into trouble by accidentally breaking his master's favorite teacup. "Oh no," he said, and then, "Double oh no," he thought, as his master came into the room, scowling, as it was clear that there was no hiding the truth of what had happened. Quickly, before the master could say anything, Ikkyu asked, "Master, why must people die?" The master replied, "It is natural, my son. Everything in this world experiences both life and death." Ikkyu held up the pieces of the broken teacup and said, "Master, death has come upon your teacup." From the great hymnal, Spirit of life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in your wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
In the silence that follows the spoken prayer, you are invited to type a joy or concern that you hold in your heart this morning into the chat window. To aid in the sharing, I will read each one aloud. This sharing of joys and concerns will not be part of the video recording that we post on YouTube. These words are a somewhat lengthy prayer of Reverend Laura Horton Ludwig, titled The Imprint of Love. Spirit of life and love, light within and without, mystery from which we have all emerged and within which we live and die. Be with us now as we allow ourselves to drop into the silence and stillness at the center of our being. As people of faith, we seek to live in a spirit of love, a spirit of community, justice, and peace. And yet, in so many corners of the world, both far and near, we see divisiveness and hate. If we look deep within ourselves, perhaps we will even find those shadow energies there, too. We struggle to respond to the outer world and our inner dramas in ways that manifest love. At times, we may fear that love will not be strong enough. At times, we may question whether love is really at the root of all things in this world with so much struggle and suffering and discord. We may struggle to hold on to our faith in love, knowing that if all things come from the one source we proclaim, that source must somehow hold hate as well as love, violence as well as peace, evil as well as good. This is the mystery within which we live and die. These are the questions that haunt our days and nights. And yet we are not without hope. Our struggles and our questions testify to our longing for peace, for love. Our very longings are born out of that mystery we dare to address as spirit of life and love. In the stillness and silence of our own heart, we read the imprint of love, created not by our own will, but planted there for us to discover. By what or whom we cannot know, and yet it is there. A clue, a talisman, a beacon, a light within. May it keep hope alive, even as we dwell in mystery. May it guide us all as we seek to act wisely and well. May it help us to be vessels of compassion for one another and for our world. Amen. If your heart is hurting, know that your community is here to help, as is the Reverend Jane Smith. Please reach out with any need. The Persian poet and mystic Hafiz wrote, "And still, after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.' Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky." And so, let the sun be a model for our giving, that we may help one another in this world that has been given to us without question or demands. You may contribute to a virtual offering plate using the donate button on our website or by mailing a check to the church office. For all that you give and all that you do for our church and its wider concerns, we give thanks. Now hear the words of Anthony DeMello. You know, all mystics, Catholic, Christian, non-Christian, no matter what their theology, no matter what their religion, are unanimous on one thing, that all is well, all is well. Though everything is a mess, all is well. Our second reading this morning is from the book of John in the New Testament, chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. I invite you to rise and bow to your spirit, to join our voices in hymn number 131 from the Gray Hymnal, Love Will Guide Us. We will sing all three verses.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
If you actually stood up, please be seated. My name is David Fu. My pronouns are he, him, and I serve as a worship associate here at Channing Memorial Church, Unitarian Universalist. As you can see, our beloved Reverend Jane Smith is out of the pulpit this morning. And, as you can probably surmise, one of the duties of a worship associate is to fill in the gap in some way, shape, or form in the minister's absence, which is once a month during the fall, winter, and spring, and every week during the summer. Occasionally we have a guest preacher, but more often than not, a worship associate leads the service. This presents an opportunity for the congregation to hear a different voice and perspective, and sometimes, because they are not a member of a congregation, a worship associate can address topics that a minister cannot. Putting together a worship service involves a fair amount of work. In addition to all the logistics, which are non-trivial, there's the issue of content. Just what are we supposed to talk about? And relentlessly, Sunday comes every week. Fortunately, we have access to a UUA, Unitarian Universalist Association, resource made just for this purpose called Soul Matters. Soul Matters lays out monthly themes for the year, and each month it provides a helpful packet chock full of readings, service elements, stories, and so-called sermon seeds to help us do the worship thing. Though it hasn't been mentioned explicitly by name, this month's theme is Liberating Love, and it has been there, quietly underpinning our worship. Reverend Jane talked about agape as liberating love last week in celebration of the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. I decided to take liberating love in a slightly different direction. Rather than viewing liberating as an adjective modifying the subject noun love, I decided to view the word liberating as a verb form, taking the noun love as its object, and to consider liberating love as an action. Hence the title of this sermon, Liberating Your Love. Well, aside from this grammar wonkiness and perhaps too clever by half wordplay, is there anything here? This morning, I, of course, will be making my case that the answer to this question is yes. I will be doing so in 3 parts with these headings. Number 1, what is this love of which you speak? Which is pretty short. Number 2, God liberates its love, which is story time. And number 3, rejecting the broken world paradigm, which relates parts 1 and 2 to how I see and want to live in this world. And before we get started, I'm going to throw in the usual God language caveat. That is, I will be using the word God in this sermon, but you should feel free to substitute whatever language you might prefer in its place. All right, let's go. What is this love of which you speak? We are born in love with this world. What I mean is that when we are born, we do not know fear, even if it is for only a short time. What I mean is that when we are born, we do not know hate. We start our lives trusting the world to provide for us. We have no choice, and thankfully, in most cases, it does. It provides food, clothing, shelter, love, and we love it in return. But then we learn to rein in our love. We are taught to fear the stranger, to be careful, and to avoid many risks. We are taught to fear death in order to survive. A practical lesson, to be sure. But once we've grown up, we need to let this fear go, at least to some degree, because if there's one thing we know in this wild, wonderful, woolly, and sometimes woeful world of ours, it is that we all must die. even our teacups. I believe that this love that we are born with is a gift from God. In the words of our prayer, it is an imprint of love created not by our own will, but planted there for us to discover. And this is the love that I believe that we need to liberate. And the good news is that we have a great example to follow, that of God. God liberates its love. A device that I often use in a sermon is the illustrative story. I take a character or a situation out of history, out of fiction, or even out of a movie, and I use it to make my point. It is an excellent technique that has served me well because, among other reasons, it lets me leverage the work of some of the greatest storytellers to a commensurate effect. With this in mind, I'm going to do this now and choose the character, God, from the Bible. Because this is Channing Memorial Church, I don't have any qualms about this. And because this is a Unitarian Universalist church, I'm going to use the gender-neutral pronoun it, with a capital I, as God's personal pronoun in most of what follows. So, what is this story about God liberating its love? It goes like this. God created the world and humankind, and it was good, but it had mixed feelings about the whole affair. Yes, there were all the lovely plants and animals, but the people, made in its image, it loved them so much, but they just wouldn't behave. From the very beginning in Genesis with Adam and Eve, and then Cain and Abel, why couldn't they do better? God gets fed up with it all and destroys the world with a giant flood, only saving the family of Noah and the animals. After some reflection, God realizes that global destruction when the people misbehave is not really a sustainable practice. So it promises Noah it won't do that again, and Noah and family are to repopulate the earth and take care of the animals, etc., etc., etc. God thinks to itself, maybe if people had more rules to guide them, they wouldn't misbehave so. And so the Old Testament is filled up with rules, many, many rules. And still the people misbehave. And God gets angry. And it does a lot of smiting and such, but it keeps its promise to the descendants of Noah, and it doesn't wipe the slate clean again. Life goes on. Fast forward to the New Testament and the book of John and today's second reading. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. These two verses, and especially the first, are arguably the most famous in the Bible, and they are held most dear and close to the hearts of many Christians. And it's everywhere if you know to look for it. You may have seen the rainbow hair guy at sporting events holding up a sign that simply reads, John 3:16. One question that I had whilst meditating on these verses is, Who is him? The pronoun is actually ambiguous. Does it refer to God or does it refer to Jesus? Most Christians will tell you it refers to Jesus, obviously. But as a brief aside, I found a very interesting sermon which makes a case for its referring to God on the interwebs by one John M. Miller, titled John 3:16 and 17, Who is him? But all this is not really relevant to my point. My point is that up until the New Testament, God's love for the world was conditional. Rules needed to be followed, or else. But then, by sending its only child, Jesus, into the world, God liberates its love. Jesus is sent not to condemn, but to spread the message of love, of liberating your love. And even though we as humanity once again rear our ugly ugliness and crucify Jesus in response, God does not smite. God does not punish. God does not wipe the slate clean. Instead, even though people keep breaking the rules, even though people keep hurting one another, even though everything is a mess, God turns the other cheek and accepts humanity and the world for what it is. And then, for good measure, it resurrects Jesus. Cool story. And now on to the last bit, rejecting the broken world paradigm. You may have noticed the phrase broken world bandied about in our services. It is a popular concept. The UUA even has a Healing a Broken World video series. And this popularity extends into other religions as well, as an internet search on the phrase will reveal. And I understand the phrase as an acknowledgement of our problems. I accept its sentiment, and I embrace the call to action implicit in the word healing. But these words make me a little uncomfortable. There are two reasons. The first reason is that I believe that a fix the broken world or heal the broken world mentality, even if well-intentioned, can be a precarious thing. Looking at history, I believe that many of humanity's darkest moments have been the results of this kind of thinking. Because the first thing humanity has done has often been to look for someone to blame for this brokenness. We're in a terrible depression. It's the Jews' fault. Or make America great again. The second reason I don't care for this language is that it is hard on my psyche to accept the idea that the world is broken. I feel that to do so is to condemn the world, and I don't feel qualified to make such a judgment, and I don't want to make such a judgment. And I don't want to live in a broken world. I accept that there are serious problems, and I accept that I need to do my part to address them. But to me, that's just part of life. And to believe that I live in a broken world would deny me the good parts, the wonders of nature, the kindness and love of others, the beauty of music, the utter fabulosity of it all. Though everything is a mess, all is well. And Jesus was not a fixer of the world. Not in that sense, I don't think. Jesus' message was not heal the broken world, and it certainly wasn't make Judea great again. Jesus' message was love God and love one another. And the wondrous irony of this is that if humanity actually listened to and truly heeded Jesus' message, an awful lot of things would get fixed, and an awful lot of people would be healed. So, I reconcile all this by saying that the world is not broken, but that the world needs our love, our agape, and perhaps a love even bigger than that. We should emulate God and love this world. We should not fear it. We should not condemn it. Even though we hurt ourselves and one another, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes on purpose, even though we will be hurt. And in these times, we may lose our love for life and for the world and all the people in it. But like Jesus, our love for this world can and will be reborn, and it can be set free again. If we just have the courage and the faith to believe. Amen. Please rise in body of spirit as we join our voices in hymn number 1057, Go Lift It Up.
Lift it up, love bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day. Go lift it up, love bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day.
And liberate your love. For the world is not broken, but the world needs your love.